mystery. A paranormal perfect storm known simply as Monsterland. The Monsterland podcast is recorded live in an undisclosed location somewhere in the heart of high strangeness, just outside of Monsterland, Massachusetts. And now, here are your hosts, paranormal author, researcher, and speaker, Ronnie LeBlanc, and the host of The Curse of Oak Island, drilling down on history, Maddie Blake.
Welcome to the first of what we know and believe to be a long, strange, and wonderful journey into Monsterland and beyond. I'm Maddie Blake. You've seen me, you've heard me, you just don't know me. And with me is author, researcher Ronnie LeBlanc. Now, Ronnie, I'm from Boston.
Yeah.
So I can feel my older brother punching me if I say LeBlanc. So I'm going to call you LeBlanc.
All right. That's good.
Ronnie, we're here on the outskirts of Monsterland.
Yeah.
This is our new podcast. First guest right out of the gate, Nick Redfern.
Huge.
Tell everybody a little bit about what Monsterland is and why we're here in Massachusetts.
Sure, yeah. So I grew up in Leominster, right, in Massachusetts, Central Mass, and went away to California for a while, like 10 years, came back, and always heard of this area called Monsterland. Now, when I was a kid, we would go and ride your dirt bikes and ride your bikes and hang out with your friends, and there was these power lines and sand dunes. And so kids would go there and party. But then also we would report weird lights in the sky, see these weird creatures, and just completely spooked out. But these stories have gone on for years, decades. And as I started kind of digging into this and having my own experience when I was young, couldn't believe the amount of cases that were coming out. And people were sitting on them and not telling anybody because of the fear of being ridiculed.
Of course.
So this area that they deemed Monsterland has history kind of going back to 1884 of different reported sightings. And there are cases and encounters that are still happening to this day. The area of Monsterland originally, which is like in southern Leominster, Lancaster area, has really gotten more developed now with new houses and things like that. So a lot of the activity seems to have kind of migrated about 5 miles through the power lines to Leominster State Forest, which is like 5,000 square feet.
5,000 square
acres.
Square acres.
Excuse me.
Of a paranormal perfect storm in a way. And you've got a military base right near there.
Right.
You've got Bigfoot. You've got cryptozoology. You've got ufology.
UFOs.
You've got paranormal. There's some ghost weirdness.
Yep.
There was a recent, not too recent, but there is a suicide thing we're going to talk about as this goes on, a rash of suicides. So in one, and then we've got the Bridgewater Triangle right near us here.
Yep.
So right in New England, we have a hotbed of all kinds of paranormal activity. And although we are based here, and although we will take cases from Monsterland that are local here, we're going to talk about it all. This is a paranormal podcast, an umbrella. We're going to put everything under the paranormal umbrella. I know some people want to say paranormal is just ghosts.
Right.
And that's fine. But to make things easier, we're going to call it Paranormal Podcast. We're going to talk about ufology, everything that falls into. And you and I are both experiencers, which we will get into as this moves along. We will both tell our stories.
Sure. Yeah.
But we have guests lined up right out of the gate. We got Nick Redfern tonight. We have the producer of The Curse of Oak Island, Joe Lessard, on next week, a show that I work on. We have the producer from Ancient Aliens on. Who else we have coming?
We got Grant Cameron coming. We have Travis Walton, Robbie Graham, and John Greenwald we're trying to get as well. So there's a lot of cool guests that are going to come on and hopefully can break this a little bit further than what we've been hearing over the past few years.
We're going to go out in the field. We're going to podcast from actual haunted places in New England and also where there have been sightings, Bigfoot sightings. So we're going to be mobile. And
that's going to be fun.
We're being filmed. And we're proud to be part of Boston Podcast Network.
Pod 617.
617. They are the best.
Awesome.
So, we're ready to go. We're both super passionate about this.
Right.
And we want to be an advocate, a voice for people who want to talk about this stuff, but maybe feel like at work they shouldn't or can't. We did a launch party recently for this podcast, and 3 or 4 people came up to us. And you can see them laugh. Our producer Carrie's here with David in the back,
right,
and Ian in the back. And people came up to us, and it's amazing. they laugh and they go, "Oh, paranormal, that's so cool." And one girl, remember, she's like, "Well, I think I saw Bigfoot." And you start laughing with her, and then she starts talking about it, and
you can tell she saw something.
She saw something, and suddenly she's not laughing.
Right.
And suddenly she is moved. And you and I have both met and spoke to people who are former law enforcement, government jobs, who have lost family members, divorces, lost their jobs because of these things. And when you talk to them, their emotion is such that you get caught up in it, and we start welling up. It's like something is going on here. It ain't nothing, as we always say. It might be something that we don't know, but it ain't nothing.
And they don't have that vehicle, that conduit, for that conversation.
Right.
So when they find out you're into this stuff, you believe in this, you won't believe this story because they have no one else to tell. So I think that's the beautiful thing about what this podcast is going to be that vehicle to kind of help people kind of come out, tell their stories, share their experiences, and we're pro believing in this stuff as opposed to being skeptic.
And because it's the first episode, there won't always be this long preamble of what we are and what we're going to do. But just by way of background, in case you're just finding us, which many of you are, my name is Matty Blake. I'm an actor, comedian, writer. I host a daily radio show in Boston called Matty and Nick on Legacy Rocker WAAF 107.3 FM. Weekdays 3 to 7. But I come from hosting, acting, and writing, and I host a show called Drilling Down on History Channel about the Curse of Oak Island. And Ronnie, I read your book, Monsterland. I'm a Mass native. You're a Mass native.
Yep.
And I read your book, had you on my show, and this podcast was born. Again, both experiencers. We're both super passionate about this. So that's kind of the background, and we move forward in that spirit of believers, skeptical believers maybe, which actually, let's get to our guest, Nick Redfern. But before we do, I have one little rant.
Oh, God.
Well,
really? Episode 1, you're going to dive into this?
All right. As the podcast,
I'll let you go. Okay.
As the podcast moves on, you'll find I like to go on rants. But I want to talk about, and I want to see what you think about this.
Go ahead. Yeah.
And this will just take 1 minute, and then we'll get into Nick Redfern. Because everyone right now has found us, saw Nick Redfern, and they don't know who we are, and they're like, "Oh my God, just get to Nick Redfern." By the way, I'm enjoying a lovely Castle Island local brewery.
I have a Wachusett.
Okay, here's my rant.
Yes.
And for all y'all who are into this stuff, bear with me. But we love to talk about being skeptical believers. There are podcasts in this space that talk about, their literally intro says, "We're skeptical. We're believers, but we're skeptical.
We're playing it safe.
We're playing it safe." Okay, fine. I understand why we had to be like that. But right now, we are living through a time where this stuff is getting more and more accepted. The government just released videos of UFOs, of literally military craft chasing, which we've all known for a long time, but they're releasing it to the public now.
Major networks
covering it. NPR, they're having these guys on. New York Times doing these articles. And suddenly, local newscasts are not playing the freaking X-Files theme underneath a story about UFOs.
With the weathermen chuckling. And
So here's my theory. Here's my challenge. Here is my... Great thinkers like me, Ronnie, often come up with things like this. I think we need to be in the paranormal space, all of us who are into this, we need to right now, as of episode 1, let it be marked today, episode 1 of Monsterland, we need to enter into an era of post-skepticism.
Amen.
We need to stop saying that we're skeptical believers because the fear is someone's going to say something that's fake and we're all going to believe it and get duped. And it's going to set the movement back. Guess what? Those people ain't going to believe you anyway. If someone does dupe us, if someone comes up with a fake Bigfoot, we all believe it and all jump on board, or a fake UFO or something, we all go, ooh, and it's fake. Guess what? It's not going to set the movement back that far because those people don't believe you anyway.
Absolutely.
And we're in an era where it's slowly being leaked out. The government's already done it. They've already set the bar for us. So stop apologizing. Stop qualifying everything by saying I'm a skeptical believer. Say it proudly. Say, I believe in this stuff. I experienced something. Or my father, like Nick Redfern, my father experienced something. Or I've researched this and I've come to the belief that something's going on that you can't explain to me. Don't call me stupid. Say it loudly. Say it proudly. Say I believe in this stuff because I've been on both sides of that bridge. I've been on the skeptical side and the absolute skeptical side, the almost atheistic side, and the believer side. And I'm telling you, it's much more fun on the believer side.
Oh, no question.
And if you get burned a couple times, so be it. So start saying it loudly and proudly. I believe in this stuff. Talk about it at work. Talk about it to people that might laugh at you. Talk about it at bars. Now is the time. The government itself has given us this window to start doing it as of 2017. It's like a mini disclosure. It's happening right now.
Right.
So let's get post-skeptical. Basically, stop being a pussy.
Wow.
Here's Nick Redfern.
Wow.
So, Nick, you've talked about synchronicities, things that happen, coincidences when you start into this work. And I want to start off by telling you that when Ronnie and I planned this podcast, from day one, right, Ronnie? He said, who do you want? I said, number one guest, Redfern. I want Redfern, first episode, get him. Ronnie gets you, and I'm waiting to hear for the confirmation, right? And in the meantime, Nick, I get booked on Jim Harold's Paranormal podcast as a guest to talk about Oak Island. And it finally drops. I'm driving home in my car, and I get a text from Ronnie saying, we've got Redfern. Nick's in for episode 1. And I go, that's awesome. I hit play on the Paranormal podcast, and Jim Harold says, my guests tonight are Maddie Blake talking about Oak Island and Nick Redfern. So it was meant to be, Nick.
The odds of that.
Yeah, well, it's all worked out good. So.
Yeah, that's true. It has.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show
Oh, yeah, well, thanks for having me on.
and stepping into Monsterland. I'd like to start with ufology. And by the way, on this show, I think we call paranormal everything,
Right.
even though there's kind of a school of thought where paranormal is just ghosts.
Yeah.
But we're
all encompassing.
we're putting in
UFOs, Bigfoot.
Right.
Yeah.
So in everything you've studied and all the books you've written, Nick, you're always very careful to say, well, we don't know this. In ufology in particular, what do we know? What do we know for sure?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, what we know for sure is that there is a genuine UFO phenomenon. I mean, there's no doubt about that because there's so many credible reports, sightings, encounters, which, just cannot be dismissed when they're worldwide and they've been going on for decades with very credible witnesses. So we know there's a phenomenon, but I think, there's been this angle of, well, what is it? We know there's a phenomenon, but what actually is it? So, I mean, there are multiple theories. I mean, when I was a kid, it was all sort of very much black and white, it was aliens coming from this star system, et cetera, et cetera. But the more I kind of got into it, the more I sort of realized that there were a lot of crossovers between various aspects of ufology and other paranormal phenomena. For example, you would see, like, for example, when the Mothman sightings were seen in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, the Mothman's something more along with the avenue of cryptozoology. But when Mothman was seen, you had UFO sightings and Men in Black reports in Point Pleasant. And this is what I found, there's this crossover angle into other phenomena, which leads me to believe we're dealing with something kind of like John Keel said, where all of these phenomena somehow interlinked. And maybe, they're from somewhere right here, in a multiple dimension, that kind of thing, rather than literally traveling from, star A or star B,
Yeah, that seems to be the kind of what I've come to the conclusion as well, that there's it's interdimensional. And there definitely seems to be that connection between Bigfoot and UFO sightings. They're seen in the same areas, same hot spots, same time periods. So that's always fascinated me, and always, I think more and more people are accepting of that fact too, which is pretty astonishing when you talk about Bigfoot being almost an interdimensional kind of entity other than a flesh and blood animal.
Yeah, and I think one of the important things to note is that, for a lot of people who got into the UFO subject, say, in the 1950s, 60s, 70s, who are still around, for a lot of them, there's no doubt there's a lot of resistance to the interdimensional paranormal angle. They just still want it to be nuts and bolts UFOs and aliens coming from this star or that star. And I think a lot of it demonstrates the sheer strength of belief systems, but I've never sort of really been much of a fan of belief systems. I kind of just go where the evidence takes me, which admittedly it means over the years some of my views have changed, and for reasons I've never really understood. very often in ufology, people don't like it when you change your mind on something. It's like, well, hang on, you're the guy who says this, and she's the
Right.
person who says that. But, I mean, if new data comes in that pushes us down a different avenue, well, there's no point censoring yourself, So I just sort of go where it leads. But I think, it's not just interdimensional. I mean, I think some UFOs probably are classified military aircraft we haven't been exposed to yet.
Sure.
Some could be strange atmospheric phenomena. But the true phenomenon, I think, is probably something that is sort of interdimensional, multidimensional, and is interlinked with a lot of phenomena that we wouldn't necessarily think were connected,
I think you've been quoted as saying, Nick, in the past that your personal favorite thing to pursue is the kind of cryptozoological angle. And you mentioned people not wanting to change your opinions or people believing in nuts and bolts. And Ronnie and I spoke briefly at a Sasquatch conference locally around Monsterland. And I asked the question, I said, who here thinks Bigfoot or Sasquatch is a, biological entity, a North American great ape? And people raised their hands. And I said, and who here thinks maybe it's something more on the paranormal side? And you could see the disdain in 70% of the people sitting
people
at the tables.
shuddered.
And like 2 people raised their hands sheepishly and looked around like they were scared.
Well, I mean, I get that a lot, but I mean, very often I'll talk about this at Bigfoot conferences, and I can see that 5% of the audience are like well into it, and 95 are just sort of cringing, and they're the guys who mainly, think we're just dealing with a North American equivalent of an African gorilla. And when I start getting my rant about, portals and doorways and synchronicities.
Oh God, Redfern's on another rant.
Yeah, but I mean, there's only one or two things you can do. One is you don't have the self-assurance and you just go along with what the others say, or you stand up and forthrightly say what you think is the answer. And that's the camp that I sort of come from. I'm not going to apologize because I think there's something beyond strange when it comes to Bigfoot. I'm going to tell it as it is. And if people like it, that's great. And if people don't like it, well, that's just bad luck,
Right. Nick, have you ever had your own personal experience with anything that's kind of cryptozoological or UFO encounter by any chance?
Well, I've not really, no, unfortunately, but I have had a lot of, you mentioned at the beginning, synchronicities. And
Yeah.
I never, ever dismiss or ignore synchronicities because I think something interconnected with this phenomenon is trying to tell us something.
Yes, agreed.
So I think, if you have really profound and bizarre synchronicities and you can figure out to some degree what it means and why you're getting it, then I think you should follow the advice, for want of a better term. And so I do get a lot of those. And I find that the more I have them and the more I take notice of them, the more I get. And so I think in some strange way, the phenomenon itself sort of pushes us along in various different avenues, so to speak.
Absolutely.
But what got me interested in when you mentioned about sightings, that my dad was a radar mechanic in the British Royal Air Force in the military, and he was involved in several UFO incidents back in the 50s, where the radar operators tracked these strange, fast-moving, high-flying objects, and fighter planes were sent up, and some of the pilots saw these balls of light, large balls of light. Others reported seeing things like classic flying saucers, and everybody was told after the third night of encounters, you won't talk about this. And my dad didn't tell anyone about it until I was about 13, and he told me, and that sort of really got me on that path, not just because it was my own dad, but also because he was, he was a radar mechanic in the military. He knew what radar was and how it worked. So that really sort of got me on the path. And plus also when I was a kid, a trip to Loch Ness, which was pretty cool, and, when you're a little kid looking out for a monster on the shores.
It's amazing.
Loch,
Nick, I'm glad you segued into that because I want to talk about Loch Ness. I read a book, you might have read it. I think it was called Hammer of the Gods. It was the Led Zeppelin biography. and they talk about Jimmy Page's obsession with Aleister Crowley. And there was a really stunning account in that book of his working in magic with a K, and they had some sort of late night, midnight ceremony. And one of the people, I think, yes, you know what I'm talking about? And one of the people's in Black Sabbath, I believe, and he became a born-again Christian like the day after whatever happened. And the guy's girlfriend said that there was a black stain left on the pool, whatever it was that appeared to them. No one talks about it. There was a black stain left on the pool there in this guy's house because they were doing Crowley magic with a K again. And the power of that. And you said as a child, and since then, when you go there, you kind of feel something. I mean, do you think the Loch Ness Monster is tied into that type of dark arts?
Yeah, I actually do.
Wow.
So much weird stuff goes on at Loch Ness. I mean, the prevailing theory within the field of cryptozoology is that they are like a relic population of plesiosaurs, which are marine reptiles, which were around at the same time as the dinosaurs. But there's one thing that people totally forget, or maybe don't even know, when it comes to the plesiosaur theory. Plesiosaurs were like crocodiles. They were reptiles. So in other words, they're not fish where they spend their entire lives underwater. They have to surface, sort of. I mean, if you look at a crocodile, they can sort of take in air and stay underwater for about an hour. Now, if we suggest that plesiosaurs could do that, then let's say there's a colony of 15 of them in Loch Ness. That means all of them would be surfacing once an hour. So that's 15 surfacings, one every hour. So every 10 hours, there'll be 150 surfacings. Within 2 days, there'll be 300. In a week, there'll be like close to 1,000 surfacings. In a year, it would be tens of thousands. So the idea that these creatures would be surfacing every hour, for thousands and thousands of times over the course of a year, and not be seen more often than they are.
Right.
There's only a handful of reports a year. That suggests to me they're not plesiosaurs because, like I said, plesiosaurs had to surface and take air. So, but when you look at it, there's a lot of weird stuff. For example, Aleister Crowley had a house near the shores of Loch Ness called the Leskin House, and he performed all sorts of rituals and rites to try and summon up supernatural entities from the loch. There was a researcher named Ted Holliday who in the 60s started out believing that the Loch Ness monsters were unknown animals. But then he started to get really weird synchronicities himself. His camera would jam also when he tried to take pictures. He had a really weird, creepy encounter with a man in black on the shores of Loch Ness. And he took part in an exorcism on the waters late one night with a priest in 1973. And all sorts of weird stuff happened then. So I'm inclined to think like Mothman and some of these other weird creatures, the Loch Ness monsters are something much more than a flesh and blood animal, or much less than a flesh and blood animal. I do think there's like a supernatural aspect to these creatures as well.
And to further that perfect stew of all this stuff, correct me if I'm wrong, Nick, but the readings I've done of a Crowley, he actually drew a picture of the demon or whatever he summoned, and it looks like a gray. He called it Lamb or something like that, and it literally looks like a gray alien.
Well, yeah, this was actually in just before the start of the 1920s, and he was taking part in a lot of rituals which went on, not for hours, but for days and weeks, in some cases months, to try and summon up, again, sort of supernatural entities. And one of them was this creature known as Lamb, Lam. And if you look at Crowley's own picture, which he drew, you can find it online. It kind of looks pretty much like the figure on the front of Whitley Strieber's Communion. The only difference being that the eyes aren't solid black, but the head is the same, the pointed chin, the sort of hypnotic look, and the sort of the small shoulders. And for all intents and purposes, Lamb was like a proto-alien grey. So again, you can find a lot of cases like this where people have had abduction experiences, and there seems to be this supernatural aspect to them, and invoking things, and rather than looking for them in the sky, and so a lot of researchers who are just fully into the UFO nuts and bolts angle, they're sort of sending out messages into space or using telescopes and whatever. And I'm like, well, you got a better chance by invoking one of these things, while you're, in an altered state of mind, trying to focus on something. You got a better chance of seeing something like that than you actually do by, firing your telescope up at the moon or whatever.
Nick, with the latest that's been happening with the videos that are coming out of the Pentagon and all that, I know you've talked in the past about disclosure and how you felt like it's never going to come. We're never going to get there. Do you think that has changed now with the recent video releases, or do you think we're still kind of in that pocket?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to say, because I think the problem is we've not seen the full picture of this group and everything that's going on. We're just seeing part of the picture so far. But I mean, what I would say, there's no doubt that when this story broke at the latter part of last year, and this we suddenly found out that there'd been this secret UFO group that had existed for about 5 or 6 years and no one knew about it. It was big news, purely and simply because that it existed and no one knew about it, even in ufology. So it does show that UFO secrets can be hidden. Now, when you had people like the New York Times and mainstream media all covering this story, I wouldn't be at all surprised that whoever is sitting on all the deep secrets about UFOs did take a great deal of interest and notice of what the media was saying and how the public was responding, etc., etc. So in that sense, I think if disclosure ever did come, then the people who might be in the position to release it have a good idea or an indication now how people are responding. But in saying that, the big concerns I have, that when people say it's coming, it's coming, it's coming, is the issue of, well, what if it's bad news?
Right.
Maybe, when people say, well, the government, they're hiding all this, bad guys. What if the government's actually the good guys and hiding something that they think, oh my God, we just cannot tell them, it's best they don't know.
Right.
I think there is this tendency to think the governments are the bad guys, but they may not be. It could just be they know far more than we do, and for whatever reason, they're like, we just cannot tell them. But then, I mean, granted, that's speculation. The only problem I have with the disclosure movement is not the possibility that it could come or couldn't come. I kind of got sick and tired of hearing certain people in disclosure and, exopolitics saying, oh, I've been told by an insider source it's coming next year.
Right.
It's coming 6 months now. Or it's coming to, and when next year comes around, well, they've had to push it back. It's next year. And it's kind of like, that story of the boy who cried wolf.
Right.
Crying wolf. And then when one came, nobody listened and he got killed,
Yeah, Ronnie does that all the time, Nick. He does it all the time. Maddie, it's coming next week. Maddie, it's coming next week.
But I mean, from my view, it's like, well, if you've got pretty strong evidence that it really is coming next month, tell us. If you're just going to do your old thing of it's coming next year or next year, well, shut the hell up until you've got something.
Right.
And leave us alone,
Amen. To that end, I've heard you've talked about, let's go to Roswell. You've talked about that you feel the Air Force in that situation may have not been this bad guy trying to throw us off track, that they just didn't know either. Your theory on Roswell rocked my world, because I'm quote unquote skeptical. I went on a rant about skepticism. We should be post skepticism before this interview. So that's how I feel. But I do tend to want to believe, and your evidence was so compelling to me with this whole, Asian connection and the testing on the people and all that. Where does that stand now? Or do you still feel pretty locked in on that? And what do you say about Roswell?
I do. But I mean, ironically, I actually hope aliens did crash at Roswell, because that would actually sort of, vindicate a lot of what we're doing. If the government said, okay, we're going to come clean, and they showed us the bodies, stored away in chemicals for 70 years, and they showed us the remains of the wreckage, even though I'd be proven wrong, I would still be very happy, because I'd be like, holy hell, these are the aliens from Roswell. But if I'm honest with myself, and I look at the history and the people I've spoken to and what was going on in New Mexico in 45 to about 48, a lot of weird high altitude experiments with people and animals and monkeys and pigs and all sorts of things. And you're bringing over all the German scientists with Operation Paperclip. And when you look at the context, and put it together with the data that I was given about these high altitude flights with human guinea pig crews, that kind of thing, it does push me down that path.
It's compelling.
Last summer, last July, I was in Roswell for the 70th anniversary, and I literally was public enemy number one.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
And which does not bother me in the slightest. I've got thick skin, I don't care.
Right.
But I almost had like 2 fist fights. I mean, real.
Come on.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Well, Ronnie and I are from Boston. We'll throw down, Nick,
Yeah,
anytime.
We got you, brother.
yeah, I mean, I don't care. I mean, somebody comes after me, I'll knock them down.
He's a Brit. He can fight. All Brits can fight. What do they say? What do they say to you? Like, what about the metal? What about what's their main gripe?
Yeah. What about the metal? What about this? What about that?
Well, what about the metal? How do you?
And I have to admit, there are some aspects of the story, like the memory metal, which are very intriguing, But as I say to people, just look at what was going on at that time. I mean, one of the things a lot of people don't know, and the rancher, Matt Brazel, who found the wreckage, he actually also went on record as stating that he'd found 2 previous balloon-based devices of the military on the ranch prior to that one. The Roswell event on that ranch was actually the 3rd event on the ranch. A lot of people don't know that. And the previous 2 were just weather balloons, just small weather balloons, but it demonstrates that 2 previous military devices had come down on the ranch, and then suddenly a 3rd one comes down. You have to wonder, well, what are the chances of 2 military devices coming down on the ranch, because it wasn't that far from White Sands.
Right.
And then a UFO happens to come down on the same area as 2 military devices, and so it's things like that that keep me wide open still. But as I said, the big irony is I would be over the moon if it was extraterrestrial. But if, again, being honest with people, I can only say what I think. And whenever I do the lecture, I always say, look, just let me do the lecture, and then at the end, if you got all your questions, we'll do it then. And let me just tell you step by step as to how and why I think this is the answer. And a lot of people at the end said, well, I'm glad you asked us to wait till the end, because having heard it bit by bit, step by step, they felt that if it wasn't extraterrestrial, they felt that was definitely the second best theory of all. So.
Yeah.
Talk about we talked about Roswell. What is the biggest case for you that says there's something out there that's the most convincing for you on the UFO side, and maybe even on the Bigfoot side?
Well, it'd be difficult to kind of nail it down to one. But I mean, what I would say, Rendlesham Forest in England, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
Because it's not that long ago, and unlike Roswell, where everybody's pretty much gone, a lot of the guys who witnessed the events back in 1980 were only like 20, so they're only like 57, 58 now.
Right, they're still around.
There's going to be plenty of time to keep interviewing them if they live to sort of 80 or whatever. But when you've got, multiple guys seeing these UFOs in various parts all around the forest and around the base, and, investigations and people being warned and told not to talk about it, Rendlesham's a good one. And I'm impressed by the I don't know if you know it, the Cash Landrum one in 1980 in the US.
In Texas, yeah.
When there was all these like fleet of helicopters following this diamond-shaped UFO.
Swamp gas, Nick. It was swamp gas.
Yeah, some researchers have wondered if it could have been like a secret device and this was like a recovery team. But the location, why would you actually be testing something just like 30 miles from the city of Houston,
Right.
That doesn't really make too much sense. So that one impresses me. And what particularly impresses me, if you look at a lot of the US files that have surfaced through the Freedom of Information Act from the 40s and through the early 50s, there's some really good reports in those files from pilots where we clearly, if we were flying disc-shaped stuff back in the 50s that could do right and left-hand turns at, 800 miles an hour and hover for 20 minutes, we would have been using them in like Vietnam or Korea or wherever.
Right.
So clearly, those kind of cases are the ones that impress me, when you go back far enough, but we can validate them and know that we were not flying anything like that back then.
Nick, thank you so much for being on the show. I just want to ask you one last question. With the breadth, you're like the Stephen King of this world. You just pump out book after
Nonstop.
book. You're incredible. You're an Iron Man. And you're always, as I said, very careful to be pragmatic about your approach and scientific. But what I wonder personally, as a man, Nick Redfern, of everything you've studied, is there anything that keeps you up at night that you might put that Nick Redfern nightlight on a little bit and look over your shoulder? What's the one thing that you keep coming back to and going like, oh, I don't even want to talk about that?
Well, I'm not sort of the kind of person who gets sort of frightened or intimidated. I just do my own thing. I guess the one thing that I often come back to, is the Men in Black mystery. I mean, I've done 4 books, and I've actually got a new book on the Men in Black coming out next month, which is called The Black Diary. So I do often come back to that because I get so many stories from people, and they're so weird. They're sort of totally paranormal, and supernatural and just so strange. So that's what I really enjoy. I guess one of the things I sometimes think about are, these weird things, kind of like when you talked earlier, you mentioned I'm writing about the Men in Black, and then a picture frame falls off the wall, which happens to be connected with the Men in Black. It kind of sometimes make you think, what is reality? Are we actually all being manipulated in some sort of weird Matrix world? That kind of makes me think about things at times.
Yeah, and we didn't even get into your new book, Slender Man, which I think is a straight up demon. I think Slender Man put that, people debate about how he created that character. He created it. I think Slender Man, that's, as you've pointed out, had that form before Slender Man came throughout time. I think he put that in the guy's head.
Yeah, it's like an ancient archetype.
Yes,
like that.
Yes. Nick Redfern, you're just simply the best in the business. I am honored that you are our first guest. You legitimize Monsterland right out of the gate. Thank you so much, brother.
All right. Well, thanks, guys. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, Nick. Look forward to see you hopefully in Leominster pretty soon.
All right. Cool. Sounds good.
Thanks, Nick.
We're going to fight a bunch of Bigfoot guys.
All right. See you later.
See ya.
Nick, thanks, buddy.
Thanks a lot.
Fantastic. We'll talk soon.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
All right. Cool.
Let me take a minute to talk about the Boston Podcast Network with Ronnie here. Just a few years ago, Ronnie, podcasting was on the fringe of the media world. We all know that. Now, there are more than 500,000 active podcasts. We're on the verge of an information revolution. Working with pod617.com, the Boston Podcast Network allows you and your business to be part of it. Pod 617 can produce your show soup to nuts with their professional producers like Kerry here, David in the back,
Yes.
Ian, the man at Media Boss, dynamic on-air hosts like us, radio quality equipment that you can see right here. They produce my show, and I couldn't be happier. Right, Ronnie?
Oh, the best.
These people are the best. Working with the Boston Podcast Network means becoming part of a community, allowing you to share in our success as you become part of a professionally marketed platform. Contact Pod617 to start planning. In the meantime, listen, learn, and binge. Whether you're into music, sports, comedy, business, politics, or the unexplained, you'll find something here for you. Visit pod617.com. In Pod we trust.
So before the episode launched, we had set up some questions to try to get some people to submit their Monster mail.
Yeah.
Just curious if we have got anything plugged in through our Facebook page.
We actually did, before we even launched our first episode here, people were on our Facebook page. How can people find us on Facebook?
So if you go to look for Monsterland Task Force, you can join us and be a part of the whole podcast revolution here.
Sweet. Well, we have an email from Ron in Boston, a different Ron. He wants to know, guys, I'm excited for this. He goes on to say that he had a sighting and all that and wants us to get in contact with him, which we will. And by the way, if you have a sighting or a video or anything you've been through, go to our Facebook page, contact us. We will go out. We will research it. We will talk to you. We'll bring our friends from Squatchachusetts out there. If it's a cryptozoological thing, if it's a UFO thing, Ronnie and I know what we're doing. We will help you. We will advocate for you. You can talk to us. But this guy goes on with his sighting, which I won't get into, but his question at the end I love. He says, all right, guys, back to the wall. You got to pick one. What is the greatest / most important paranormal event in human history?
Ooh.
Now, see,
That's
this makes me think we need to do some sort of, online social media. You know what's never been done?
what?
You know what's never been done is a March Madness paranormal
Oh, I love it.
bracket.
I love it.
Right?
The Monsterland Madness.
Monsterland Madness. All right,
my
we're doing
God.
this. All right,
All right.
Monsterland Madness. We're going to put it on social media.
Okay.
So we're going to come up with 16. Let's do a sweet 16. 64 would be,
I love it.
take
I love
forever. We'll do ufology on one, coming from the east.
Yep, okay.
And on the west, the other side of the bracket, we will do everything else. Cryptozoological, paranormal, ghosts, anything else you want. And we will have a bracket, and each week we'll do a new matchup, and we'll have a national champ at the end,
I love
right?
this. I love
So it would be, Roswell in the first round versus, Rendlesham, or we might separate them.
So now we can mix anything here, right?
Yeah.
Bigfoot sightings, UFO sighting.
Yep.
I love it.
And we're going to come up with it. But all right, so to answer Ron's question, Ronnie, off the top of your head, you got to pick one.
Ooh. I would say, and this is, I think it's just because it's more personal, because Leominster in our area is the Betty Andreasian.
Oh, that's
The whole Andreasian affair, and where her whole family was in suspended animation. And there were 5 different books that were written about her. So I think what Raymond Fowler has put together on her story, I think, is really compelling.
That's a good one. We should go up there, actually, New Hampshire, and we'll do that mobile.
Yeah. that'd be awesome.
Boy, I hate to be a hack. I hate to be cliche as a comedian. I'd never want to be hack. But how can you not say Roswell? Or you know what? I might say Rendlesham. Like Nick in our interview was great.
Yeah.
And he said Rendlesham right off the bat was what came to mind for him.
Military base, twin military base.
Plus, Nick Redfern ruined Roswell for me. I want to fight him. I'm going to fight Nick Redfern next time I see him. No, but his evidence, and if you haven't read into that, his evidence, Nick's
It's
evidence about
pretty compelling.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
As he says, well, you tell me what's more likely that aliens landed, or that this testing that we know happened
Right.
with these Asian people, that happened after 2 other balloons had crashed. So
Right,
it's I don't want it to be true, but I read that evidence, I go, God damn it.
It makes you kind of rethink.
Yeah, it does.
things, for sure. So you're going with Rendlesham as your kind of pick.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Rendlesham Forest. It's newer. It's more recent.
Yeah.
No. You know what I'm going with? I'm going with the recent disclosure. I'm going with the 2017 videos. I think we're living through something. Sometimes in life, Ronnie, you live through something and you don't realize what you're going through as you go through it.
How significant it
Right.
is,
Like I remember hearing Nirvana and I was like, they're kind of okay.
Right.
And then years later, like, oh my God, I lived through Nirvana and I blew it off. Right? That's what's happening right now.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're seeing some unbelievable kind of movement towards some kind of disclosure.
If I told you 5 years ago,
no,
that, by the way, in the winter of 2017, no big deal, but the government's going to release military video of fighter pilots chasing something that they can't
and we've been
explain.
doing
You'd
this
be like,
study forever.
What?
Yeah.
You'd be like, get me to 2017. So I'm going to go with the recent disclosure, I'll call it.
I think that's a good one, because when have we seen stuff on CNN, seen stuff on Fox, PBS, talking about this whole UFO thing? I mean, it's pretty awesome.
And I just want to follow up on one thing from that interview with Nick that I don't know if I kind of sussed it over too quick, but that whole thing about Loch Ness and Jimmy Page.
Creepy as heck.
So what happened was Jimmy Page bought Aleister Crowley's house and started practicing this magic.
Right.
This black magic, again, magic with a K. It's a whole series of rituals. It's basically kind of satanic rituals. And one night, as is described in this book, I believe Hammer of the Gods, sorry if I'm wrong, but I believe it was, they had some sort of black mass, a midnight to 3 a.m., which is the Antichrist hour, series of incantations to bring forth basically what are demons or powers that let you control what goes on here on Earth.
Yeah.
And according to several witnesses who were there, including the girlfriend of the guy from Black Sabbath, who, by the by, after that event immediately became a born-again Christian, to this day wears a cross, Hammer of the Gods. Thank you, Kerry.
Wow.
Our producer Kerry's right on it. Wears a cross around his neck to this day. And again, you and I will go through our paranormal experiences later as this podcast goes on. I had something very similar to this. He wears a crucifix to this day, born-again Christian. Jimmy Page himself stopped talking about all this stuff. He gave up all the Crowley stuff. And the story was that whatever appeared that night left a black stain on their pool to the point where they emptied the water, or it might have already been emptied, but they could not scrub it out.
So, like, was the water still in the pool?
You know what? I threw that detail in because I don't remember in the book, but let's just say the water was out of it.
Okay.
Something imprinted on that pool.
Wow.
A black, ashy stain, and they could not scrub it out. And that affected everyone who was there that night. So Crowley's tentacles, if you will, he might have unlocked this whole thing. Like, because the UFO sightings, you think about when he was doing that, calling up Lamb, who, by the way, as we established in that interview, looks just like a Grey. Kerry was pulling up pictures of Lamb, and I encourage you to Google it at home. Look up Lamb. Don't invite him in your house.
Oh, God.
But it looks like a Grey. And this is this is like long time before we started seeing these
It's almost like Aleister opened up some kind of a portal.
Look at that.
Right?
Oh, my God. We're looking at pictures at Lamb now. It looks like a Grey.
It's uncanny.
And this is long before we started seeing flying saucers and Grey and reports of Grey and all that. So Crowley might have opened this whole portal up. That's a book. That should be Nick's next book.
Yeah.
So anyway, we'll get into that. We're going to do that. We're building our socials now. We're going to have Instagram. We're going to have Twitter. We're going to do this poll online. It's going to be fun. It'll be the first of its kind.
I love it.
All right. That's Monster Mail. If you got any questions for us, again, go to our Facebook page for now.
Yeah, and download the episodes on iTunes, please. Subscribe. But you can go to Monsterland Task Force on Facebook, join our group, and be an insider here.
You know what we should do?
Yeah.
We should let our professional voiceover guy tell people how they can get on iTunes and get this now.
That's a good idea.
Thank you so much for joining us on our first ever episode of Monsterland. We are so excited. I got to thank the people that power this, besides Pod 617, our friends at Team Squatchachusetts right here in Massachusetts. Yes. They run the show here in terms of cryptozoological research, follow-up, investigations. They are the best.
They are the go-to. John and Dave and Team Squatchachusetts, can't thank them enough for helping to get this Monsterland podcast up and running. So
how can we find them if you have any sort of situation, Ronnie, where we need to get out there and investigate? How can we find these guys?
One of the easiest ways is go on Facebook and look up Squatchachusetts. You can join their group. It's a closed group. You can ask to join, and you'll be connected with other researchers, other people that have had experiences and encounters. So it's a great group to be a part of and learn more about this whole phenomenon.
And this is exactly the type of thing we want to advocate for. Groups like this that'll help you if you feel like you've gone through something and you're too shy to talk about it or too embarrassed to talk about it. Guys like Team Squatchachusetts, these guys are great guys. We went out on a hunt with them. They're the best. And by the way, their track record on hunting is pretty damn good.
Oh, yeah.
The last group they brought out saw something.
Yeah.
So thank you, Team Squatchachusetts. Thank you to our guest, Nick Redfern.
Awesome.
And
have to have him on again for
next
sure.
week we have, for those of you who are into mysteries, unsolved mysteries, and by the way, a lot of paranormal aspects to Oak Island, which I can speak to very well, from Prometheus, the production company that makes Oak Island and Ancient Aliens. We have producer Joe Lassard. We're going to break down Oak Island. We're also going to have someone from Prometheus a little later on talking about Ancient Aliens.
That's great.
The show Ancient Aliens. As a matter of fact, I think we might have on the guy who created Ancient Aliens. Who else we have coming up in upcoming weeks?
So we got Grant Cameron coming on soon. We have Travis Walton, Robbie Graham, and we're talking to some other big hitters as well, like John Greenwald. So pretty excited.
Love it.
Excited.
Thank you all. Reach
Thank
out
you.
to us. I'm at the Matty Blake on social media.
At author Ronnie LeBlanc.
And by the way, we're available to speak at any of your paranormal
That's
stuff.
right, yes.
Put us up, Red Roof Inn. We're good to go. Thank you so much. We'll see you next week. Until then, let's get post-skeptical and keep believing.